Welcome back to day 2 of ICE London and day 2 of ICE 365 Live, coming to you from stand S9 110 at XL London and online via ice365.com. Yesterday we saw an incredible 27,883 people coming through the door, and today promises to be even bigger. I'm Katie Goldfinch, your studio presenter, and I'll be bringing you all the latest from the biggest gaming show of the year. With this year's market focus, we've been moving around the globe over the next few days. We kicked off yesterday with some global trends, followed by a deep dive into the US market. Remember, you can tell us how you're enjoying this year's ICE 365 Live on social media. You can reach us on Twitter at ICE365 Global, and on both Twitter and LinkedIn, use the hashtag ICE365 Live. We'd love to find out what you think. Now, today, we're heading to Europe and the UK, where there has been a period of uncertainty for the industry amid the government's review of the 2005 Gambling Act. The review was kicked off in December 2020, and a white paper setting out the government's plans to reform the 2005 Act has prompted a lot of debate, soul-searching, and ultimately a lot of positive changes across the sector. This white paper, however, has been delayed multiple times, with many deadlines coming and going. Now, we have an incredible lineup of speakers that will debate how the industry will look under a new regulatory model, including a special interview with the man responsible for regulating the market, Andrew Rhodes of the Gambling Commission. This afternoon, we're then headed to Latin America, where a number of countries are in the process of regulating online gambling. This has prompted huge excitement from operators as a new revenue stream starts to open up. However, as we'll hear, things do not always go smoothly. But since we have them in person, we'll start in Asia, welcoming back Ben and Andrew from Inside Asian Gaming to bring us the latest headlines from the region. Take it away.
Thank you, Katie. It's great to be back here again for day 2. We had a fantastic day 1, didn't we, at the Inside Asian Gaming stand. We had a whole bunch of people through. Very, very busy ICE yesterday, and you know, get yourself on down here to ICE because it's absolutely pumping here. So on to the Asian headlines. So yesterday we talked a lot about land-based and Macau. Today we're going to have a little bit more on the iGaming industry and other markets in Macau, in Asia, sorry. And probably the tier 2 markets in Asia. There's 3 very distinct markets that come in under Macau, and they are the Philippines, Singapore and Australia. So we're going to go through those. So Ben, let's start off with the Philippines. What's the latest news in the Philippines?
Well, as you say, Andrew, when we talk about online gaming in Asia, it's really the Philippines as the only really properly regulated market in terms of online gaming. Of course, Australia has sports books, but in terms of genuine online casino, we're talking about the Philippines, and the Philippine offshore gaming operators, the POGO industry, certainly been talked about a lot these past few weeks. There's been quite a bit of, I'd say, organised opposition to that industry by certain parts of government. In the Senate, there's been a lot of talk about people wanting to disband that industry. And I think that's, I mean, the debate here is really around a lot of crime that's been associated with the pogo industry, kidnappings and so forth. But I think it's important, and the gaming regulator in the Philippines, PAGCOR, has made this point, that actually most of that crime, or all of that crime really, is coming from the unlicensed, non-legal so-called pogo operators. So if we look at the industry over there, we've got a number of European operators and we've got some Chinese operators, and of course most of the European operators tend to be the regulated, licensed ones by PAGCOR. But there are certainly some operators that are not licensed, should not be operating, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion is coming in industry in the Philippines. So there have been calls to disband it, but PAGCOR has come out and said, look, that's not got nothing to do with the licensed, the companies that are licensed to operate in the Philippines. They're the unlicensed ones. PAGCOR has promised to nurture the pogo industry. They've said that's not going anywhere. I think they like the revenues coming in too. So I think that as far as we can tell at the moment, I think we're going to see growth in the regulated online gaming industry in the Philippines over the coming years.
And I guess the previous president of the Philippines, Duterte, was if there was going to be a president that was going to be against that industry, it would have been him. But in fact, he turned around to China and said, look, we need the revenue and we're going to keep this industry. And we have a new president now, Bongbong Marcos, and he seems to be even more pro the industry and pro commerce in general. So I guess that augurs well for the pogo industry. It's just got to sort itself out over time. A bit like here in Europe, the industry's mature and well developed and went through a lot of hurdles to get there. I think Philippines much the same. What about the bricks and mortar industry in the Philippines?
Well, I mean, I think when we talk about the Philippines as a whole, be it online or land-based as well, we're talking about the biggest growth market in Asia. It is the place that all industry suppliers want to be. We're seeing a lot of development in the land-based industry, and so, I mean, at the moment, first sort of year after COVID, we're looking at about a US $4 billion industry for the land-based industry in the Philippines at the moment. But there are projections that should reach around about 10 billion by 2027. And one of the main reasons of that is new developments, new property openings. Already we have 4 very large integrated resorts in Manila, but there are a number still to come over the coming years. Of course, Solaire being sort of the top of the pops, I suppose you'd say, in Manila, is opening a second property, Solaire North in Quezon City, and planning a third, let's call it Solaire South, down in Cavite. So there's 2, and of course we've got a West Side City project in the Entertainment City precinct as well. We've got more development happening in Cebu with the New Star project and Emerald Bay coming in the next few years. And then Clark, a very interesting region about an hour or 2 north of Manila, which is growing massively as well. We've got a wonderful, exciting property there, which name has slipped my mind right now.
I think you're talking about Han.
I am talking about Han Resort.
Yes.
Talking about Han, and of course Royce as well, just down the road from Han, is opening a significant expansion in the coming months as well. So that's another growth area. So Philippines, we're talking about GGR growing by 2.5 times over the next 3 to 4 years there.
Certainly the fastest growing market in Asia, no doubt. The most number of slot machines in any jurisdiction in Asia, which is why all the slot manufacturers want to be there. I was lucky enough to have a nice long lunch with Mr. Han a few weeks ago, and he was telling me about his expansion plans there, and they're very, very impressive. Nick Faldo designed a golf course, actually going to have several 18-hole golf courses up there in Clark, which is a special Freeport zone and has a special tax status. So the Philippines growing from an online and a land-based perspective. What about Singapore? Singapore's a very different kettle of fish. Marina Bay Sands, obviously a property that is iconic and everybody sees a lot of. I mean, talk to us a little about what's going on in Singapore.
Well, of course, as you say, Marina Bay Sands is not only an iconic property, but has long been known as the most profitable integrated resort in the world for pure square meterage there, and certainly we know is very, very successful. Singapore has rebounded very strongly from COVID, very, very profitable again now, both integrated resorts. There are 2 in Singapore, Marina Bay Sands and Resorts World Sentosa, but also quite a bit happening there in the future in terms of just 2020, I think it was, that they both operators came to an agreement with the government for significant expansion projects. So we're going to see over the next few years, US $3.3 billion poured into each project for expansion. So quite significant there, and that's going to grow the market as well. I think again, we're looking at Singapore is currently around about the $4 billion mark. Projections are for about 4.4 in 2023, but moving up to around 5.3 to 5.4 in 2024. And that's before these expansion projects have even opened. They've barely started yet. So Singapore is certainly on the way up. And I should mention that Singapore is widely renowned in terms of regulation as the gold standard in regulation around Asia. It's very, I'd say, strongly regulated, but well regulated. There seems to be a pretty good relationship between regulator and operator there, and that seems to be helping this growth of the industry that we're seeing.
And it's interesting, in these 3 markets we're talking about today, the Philippines, Singapore and Australia, they're all sort of around the ballpark of a $5 billion gross gaming revenue market, yet Singapore gets that with just two properties, whereas the Philippines has got the 4 in Entertainment City, plus Clark, plus Cebu, plus all the Padcore properties and so on. So those 2 iconic properties, Resorts World Sentosa and Marina Bay Sands, are really doing serious business. And Marina Bay Sands, I mean, it's well known in the industry there, net profit margin can be as high as 50%, and incredibly, ranging sort of 30 to 50% depending on the year. So an incredibly profitable property.
And of course, Marina Bay Sands run by Las Vegas Sands. Las Vegas Sands Chairman and CEO Rob Goldstein recently suggested that Marina Bay Sands would make annual EBITDA of around $2 billion, US $2 billion in the near future. So that's pretty handy.
Yep, that's a nice chunk of change. Let's move on to our home country, Australia, and boy, has there been a lot going on in Australia in the last few years. You live in Sydney, I'm in Macau, so I'll defer to you once again to give us the lowdown on what's been going on in Sydney and Melbourne and across the Great Southern Land.
Well, I mean, where do we start with Australia? I guess we start with Crown Resorts, who there's been a number of regulatory inquiries across multiple states into multiple operators in Australia, but it did begin with Crown Resorts. It actually began in New South Wales with the, at that time, unopened Crown Sydney project. So there was an inquiry, the Bergen inquiry into Crown Resorts in Sydney, into suitability, based on a number of media reports at the time that alleged certain links with Asian junkets and money laundering and all sorts of things. Well, the inquiry certainly unearthed a lot more than many of us expected. So Crown Sydney was found unsuitable to hold its licence. A Royal Commission that followed that in Victoria found Crown Melbourne unsuitable. Since had Star Entertainment Group in Sydney, unsuitable. Star in Queensland, unsuitable, and Crown in Perth, unsuitable. So we've got almost all major properties around the country currently unsuitable and technically unlicensed. Most of them are under the purview of an independent monitor at the moment, given a certain amount of time to prove they've returned to suitability and to hold on to their licence. So it's a transitional period for the industry in Australia. Still a lot to be determined, I guess, onto how that's going to play out. But obviously Star and Crown, the two major operators there, are currently in the processes of working through that. They've seen significant changes to their boardrooms and executive teams, and that's all still ongoing as we speak.
Well, transitional as a kind word to use, it sounds like a decimation of the industry. I mean, all major operators losing their licenses all pretty much simultaneously, and having these so-called independent monitors in to run the properties. It's quite an amazing situation there, and as you say, let's see how that plays out. And I think anybody who has been an executive in an Australian major integrated resort is somewhat toxic down. They're all being sort of shipped out in a whole heap of new people in, so it really is like starting again. And in some ways, Australia, even though there's been casinos in Australia since 1973, is almost a greenfield site now. It's almost like a complete start again. But anyway, let's move on. Talk a little about the iGaming industry in Australia. Not so big, but there is some iGaming there.
Well, there's certainly online sports betting. That is the big online industry in Australia, as we know. There are multiple sports books operating, usually licensed out of the Northern Territory. We've seen a bit of a shift in the power base in recent years. Tabcorp has been the traditional stronghold of sports books and sports betting in Australia, but Sportsbet, of course owned by the UK's own Flutter, is the industry leader now with around about 50% market share. But there are a number of strong operators. Sports betting in Australia is a very significant industry, but of course there's no legalised online casino, no online poker. That's all been illegal for some time, but it's been tightened even further in recent years. So that is the discussion point now, I guess, in certain areas is, can we get regulated online casino or online poker back into Australia? I know there are works going behind the scenes around online poker, but I think that will take some time.
What an incredible rise by Sportsbet over the last, let's call it a decade or so, to go from almost zero to hero. A few acquisitions in there, and sort of the fall of Tabcorp, the sort of traditional place to go and bet. Australians will bet on two flies crawling up a wall, as we say, and there is a huge sports betting market there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Maybe, and just very briefly, poker, online poker in Australia. There was online poker in Australia, quite well established there at one stage. PokerStars, Full Tilt, we're talking quite some time ago now. What exactly happened?
Well, under Australia's Interactive Gambling Act, online poker of any sort has technically been, you cannot offer that to Australians, and that's been the case for many, many years, but there were loopholes in that law. And so up until 3 or 4 years ago, we did have PokerStars, we had 888 Poker, we had all the major, we had Full Tilt. We had all these guys who were operating very strongly in Australia. Until it was around about 2017, I believe, they tightened the Interactive Gambling Act to really increase their ability to punish anybody offering those services to Australians. And so we saw PokerStars pull out of the market. We saw everybody pull out of the market pretty much overnight. And so, online poker has not been offered to Australians legally since. Of course, I would argue, and I know because I'm very close to the poker industry in Australia, that there are a number of illegal operators providing that to Australians, and it's quite a flourishing industry. So there's an argument for regulating it.
Well, thanks very much, Ben, and thank you to all of you for watching us in the last 2 days. We won't be back tomorrow, but ICE TV certainly will be. It's been a delight to be here, and we'll see you next year. The IAG team will see you next year in 2024, right here at ICE London. Thanks for watching.